We have long been told that breast is best. This is true for the most part, especially when it comes easily. But like everything, when something comes easily, we take it for granted. We call it normal. We assume every mom will be able to breastfeed with the same overflow of milk and that all babies will find their way to the nipple. We hear over and over again that feeding your baby is natural and nature always provides. Given those circumstances, who wouldn't want to nurse? The truth is that breastfeeding is no different than anything else. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard. There's often a learning curve, and even if you plan on nursing for a long time, you may not make it to the finish line, because not everyone does. We hear all about the benefits: nutrition, immunity, bonding. The list is endless. But what we don't hear often enough is that for some of the millions of moms who give birth each year, breastfeeding is impossible for very real biological and physiological reasons. For others, it is at best uncomfortable and at worst incredibly painful. For still others, it is undesirable for any of a whole host of reasons, from family structure to time management to postpartum complications. Breastfeeding, like childbirth, is not one size fits all. What works for most moms isn't necessarily going to work for you. Educating yourself before you start breastfeeding is important. Despite what the media, doctors, and family and friends tell you, answers to breastfeeding problems aren't always obvious. If you wait to find help until after you give birth, you could end up caught in the maze of other people's opinions. And trust me, those opinions won't save you when it's 2 o'clock in the morning and your baby can't latch on to your traumatized nipples, or when you've nursed for hours and he's still hungry. Although breastfeeding is one of the most beautiful experiences for a new mom when it works, it can also be one of the most heartbreaking when it doesn't. And that heartbreak can linger for months and years after you stop. While it is wonderful to hope for the best, it's also important to prepare for reality. Your decision to breastfeed is yours and yours alone, and I want to help empower you with the facts before you even start. The history of breastfeeding in medicine. Speaking of facts, why are they so hard to find? Like so much of medicine that pertains to the feminine, there's little medical information about breastfeeding that's accurate. There's no accepted range of normal in our medical textbooks. No mention of how to keep a good milk supply going on boards exams. As doctors, we don't even learn how a baby transfers milk out of a breast, even though it's one of the most fascinating biological processes. Instead, even as doctors, we are left with folklore, pseudomedicine, and misinformation. With all this confusion, how do you, as a mom, know who to turn to when you run into trouble? And why is so much of what you hear contradictory and misleading? To understand that riddle, we have to dig into the history of breastfeeding in medicine. Until the early 1900s, the majority of babies in the United States were born at home with the help of midwives. Midwives encouraged things like immediate skin-to-skin contact and keeping baby and mom together for as long as possible, and as such, the majority of moms breastfed. Moms who couldn't breastfeed had two options: wet nursing or dry nursing. Wet nursing meant having another mom who was already producing breast milk, usually from a recent pregnancy, nurse your baby. This was the most popular option and was, at one point, a highly organized profession of women who had recently lost a baby and or struggled to make ends meet. Dry nursing meant giving your baby solid foods, like ground rice or some other grain, and milk from an animal, like a cow, sheep, or goat. In 1900, as allopathic medicine was becoming a new profession, medical doctors started getting involved. As doctoring took root, so did the medicalization of childbirth. The all-male doctors, women weren't allowed in medical school, had very different schools of thought from those of midwives. They believed pregnancy was a diseased condition that required as much intervention as possible.